Okay, so today we're going to dive into something pretty interesting, the world of Indian singles in the UK who are, looking for love and marriage.
Yeah, and it's especially interesting in the UK, right, with such a large Indian diaspora.
Exactly. And we've got this snippet from the Indian Matchmaking Podcast that kind of lays out the landscape for us, and I think it does a good job of hitting the key points. So we'll use that as a jumping off point to explore.
Yeah, sounds good.
So one of the things that the podcast snippet mentions right off the bat is this question of where do you actually meet like-minded Indian singles in the UK, right? Because you've got this interesting blend of wanting that cultural connection while also being this very diverse environment.
Yeah, and it's not always easy, right? I mean, you've got the traditional avenues like family introductions and community events, which are still super important. But then you've also got this whole rise of online platforms, and some are even specifically for, the Indian diaspora.
Right, like niche dating apps and things like that.
Exactly. And I think the real challenge, the thing that people are really grappling with is finding those spaces both online and offline where you can really connect with someone on a deeper level based on shared values and backgrounds, not just, proximity.
Yeah, it's about finding your tribe within a larger tribe.
Right, exactly.
So moving on to the second big question that the snippet brings up, this whole idea of arranged versus love marriage. I mean, this feels like a pretty pivotal question when you're talking about Indian singles anywhere really, but especially in a Western context like the UK.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is that it's not so much a black and white issue anymore. It's not like it used to be where it was strictly one or the other.
Right. It's less about arranged marriage versus love marriage and more about a spectrum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might have families that are still very involved in the process of introductions, but ultimately it's the individuals who have the final say.
Right. So it's more like a hybrid model is evolving.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It's about adapting these traditions to modern realities.
And that leads us to the third question that the snippet raises, which is, how do cultural expectations and family pressure actually play into the choices that these individuals are making? Because, you're in the UK, you've got this Western culture all around you,
Yeah.
but then you've also got your family, your heritage, your cultural background.
Yeah, and that can be a lot to balance. There can be this expectation from family to marry within the community, maybe by a certain age, and, even considering specific professions in a potential partner.
Right, is he a doctor or a lawyer?
Exactly. And so, imagine trying to balance those expectations with your own desires for a life partner. It can create a lot of pressure. It requires a lot of careful navigation.
And I imagine there are probably also some generational differences in those expectations too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The older generation might have a very different view than someone who's, in their 20s or 30s.
Right, like this constant balancing act, honoring your roots while also building your own life.
Yeah, and if we zoom out for a second and think about broader trends, this is something that a lot of diaspora communities struggle with, right? How to maintain their cultural heritage while also integrating into a new society. And marriage and relationships become this really personal arena where these tensions play out.
So just to kind of recap for our listeners, what we're seeing with Indian singles in the UK is that finding a partner isn't just about the typical dating challenges, right? It's also about navigating these specific cultural layers, like where to find people who share your values, how these traditional concepts of arranged marriage are evolving, and of course the influence of family and cultural expectations.
Yeah, that's a great summary. I think you hit all the key points.
So with all that said, with all this talk about cultural context, I'm kind of curious, what are some of the more universal aspects of looking for a partner in today's world? Right? Because we're all interconnected now more than ever, regardless of where you come from. So what are some of those common threads that everyone kind of has to navigate, and how do you find your own path through all the noise and the pressure that's out there? Something to think about.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't know if I have all the answers, but it's definitely worth pondering.
Well, on that note, thanks for joining us today for this deep dive. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.